This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Mali coup supporters demand inclusion in government as talks with military junta begin. Sudan declares a 3-month state of emergency as floods kill more than 90 people. And we highlight how 2 Chinese companies are preparing for potential mass production of coronavirus vaccines. Hello and a very warm welcome to you wherever you're joining us. This is Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, in sports, Cameroon Italia 90 World Cup heroes to receive houses promised by President Paul Biya 30 years later. We begin in Mali, where talks about a transition back to civilian rule following last month's military coup have gotten off to a chaotic start. Opponents of the deposed president Ibrahim Boubacar Keita are accusing the ruling junta of excluding them from some of the negotiations. The Bamako talks are expected to continue through the weekend. Last month's military takeover was welcomed by many Malians who say they are tired of alleged violence by Islamist and ethnic militias and high-level corruption in the West African country. The National Committee for the Salvation of the People is under intense pressure from West African neighbors to swiftly return power to civilians. To the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where dozens of armed men who had stormed Bunia, the capital of DR Congo's northeastern Ituri province, have left the town. According to the region's governor, Jean Bamanisa, the men were from the Cooperative for the Development of Congo, an armed group accused of ethnic attacks and killing more than 1,000 civilians since December 2017. They were demanding the release of jailed militia fighters. Security forces later peacefully got them to leave after hours of negotiations. Several militia and rebel groups have been staging attacks in the region. This was the first time in recent years that they had entered a major city in the Great Lakes area, bordering Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi. 2 Libyan families have filed a civil lawsuit in a U.S. federal court accusing the commander of the Libyan National Army, Khalifa Haftar, of war crimes, human rights abuses, and torture. The criminal complaint also seeks compensatory damages from Haftar. Lawyers of the Libyan families have written a letter to United States Attorney General William Barr requesting him to launch criminal proceedings against Haftar. The complaint is the 3rd filed in a U.S. court against the military commander. It is linked to a 2016-2017 siege of the Libyan district of Ganfouda, which has been encircled for months as Haftar waged a years-long military campaign to drive Islamist-led opponents from the eastern city of Benghazi. Now, South Africa's government is stepping up its efforts to deal with the scourge of gender-based violence. President Cyril Ramaphosa hosted a virtual national men's dialogue in efforts to end gender-based violence and femicide. At the event, Ramaphosa announced that his government has begun to introduce harsher minimum sentences for alleged perpetrators. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
The National Men's Dialogue is an initiative of the governing African National Congress's Working Committee and civil society. Participants have been drawn from all walks of life. The dialogue is an initiative by the party to tackle issues faced by ordinary South Africans on a daily basis. It was held under the theme Men as Partners, Generation Equality. At this gathering, President Cyril Ramaphosa admitted that currently government is not doing nearly enough to end violence against women and children.
We need to do much more and better to effectively deal with gender-based violence and femicide. Much as we've come up with a national strategic plan that was drafted by the women of our country, who took up the cudgels of fighting against this scourge. Much as we've got that strategic plan, much more needs to be done. Much as we set aside last year 1.6 billion and will set aside even more, much more needs to be done.
Gender-based violence in South Africa continues to increase. It's a distressing issue for the government and society at large. Ordinary members of the society also formed part of this dialogue and contributed to the propositions.
We must provide greater economic opportunities for women, and we must inform people of their rights. Programs that reach out to men and change societal beliefs and attitudes that permit exploitative behavior are urgently required.
President Ramaphosa also announced here that his government is effecting new stringent laws to help end violence against women and children.
These are the Domestic Violence Amendment Bill, which, among other things, facilitates the obtaining of protection orders and makes the consequences of contravening a protection order much harsher. The Criminal Law, which is the Sexual Offences and Related Matters Bill, and the Criminal and Related Matters Amendment Bill aim, amongst other things, to tighten bail conditions for alleged perpetrators and provide for harsher minimum sentences.
In this forum, the governing ANC made a call to men in the country to be part of a generation that will achieve gender equality and end gender-based violence. ELIZA Majuri for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now to the China International Fair for Trade and Services, which opened on Friday. The fair aims to strengthen cooperation in the global service industry. The 6-day event covers everything from culture and tourism to 5G technology. 2 Chinese pharmaceutical companies are displaying potential COVID-19 vaccines at the fair. Our reporter Wu Guoxiu visits one of the production facilities and talks to their executives.
Testing the packaging lines. One vaccine candidate produced by biopharma company Sinovac has been in phase 3 clinical trials since July. But to prepare for potential mass production, the company has built this 20,000 square meter production plant.
Testing began in this vaccine facility on June the 30th. From cultivating the virus to the final packaging, one vaccine will take more than 40 days to create. And the Sinovac believes this facility is able to produce more than 300 million doses annually.
The company says phase 1 and 2 trials showed its vaccine was safe and effective without serious side effects.
After performing injections on over 1,000 volunteers, some only showed minor fatigue or discomfort, no more than 5%. Fever is a major index by which we evaluate a vaccine's safety, that limited to about 2 to 3%. As for effectiveness, after 2 injections, almost all volunteers developed antibodies, around 97 to 98%.
Along with Sinovac's vaccine, China has 3 COVID-19 vaccine candidates that have entered phase 3 clinical trials, making up of half of the world's 6. Sinopharm's candidate, also an inactivated type, entered phase 3 trials in late June. The company says its facilities in Beijing and Wuhan can produce 2.2 million doses a year.
The phase 3 clinical trials haven't been completed and the vaccine has not officially been approved and marketed as of now. But as a commodity, in the case of an emergency, foreign governments can purchase vaccines from us. There is no obstacle to such purchases. We'll supply the vaccine to whoever buys it. This is in compliance with the law.
The developers of these 2 vaccines say they are expected to enter the market by the end of this year. Wu Guoxiu, CGTN, Beijing.
And staying with the search for a possible vaccine, the World Health Organization says over 30 coronavirus vaccines have entered clinical trials. 9 of those have gone into phase 3, including 4 by Chinese companies. The rest are from firms in the United States, Britain, Australia, and Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump has promised to have a vaccine ready for distribution by the end of October. but many experts say that is unrealistic. Russian scientists have published a peer-review report on their vaccine saying early tests showed signs of an immune response. It does, however, confirm that only 76 people have taken part in clinical trials so far. Well, China this week celebrated the 75th anniversary of the Allied victory over Japan in World War II. China played a significant role in combating the Axis powers, especially in the fight against Japanese imperialist forces. The Director of Political Affairs for Kenya's ruling Jubilee Party, Kadara Harith Swale, says that China's struggle has set an example for Africa. Although independence has been achieved, some Western countries still control Africa through monetary and financial means. He believes that Africans should guard against neo-colonialism.
More than 95% of the loans that Africa is having and we are struggling to pay is not to China. It is the loan we are paying to the Western donors and Western countries. All these loans will come with so much restrictions, conditions. Some of those conditions are inhuman. But if you look at the loans which we are getting from China, we see how they are being used. It is infrastructure, it is the health facilities, it is for this or for that. So we have realized that these people are telling us all kinds of stories so that we stay away from China and so that they continue to exploit Africa.
In Beirut, search and rescue efforts have intensified after signs of life were detected in an area shattered by the explosion. An excavator dug through the rubble in a residential area destroyed by the blast. On Thursday, Lebanese rescue workers detected signs of life in the rubble of the same building. Volunteers from Chile joined Lebanese volunteers and civil defense members in searching through the area. On Friday, ceremonies were held in the city to mark 1 month since the explosion. You're watching Africa Live here on CGTN. It's time for us to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. Here's what's coming up. Sudan declares a 3-month state of emergency as floods kill more than 90 people. And in South Sudan, UN withdraws troops from several civilian protection sites.
Xinjiang, a crossroads of Asia and a trade hub on the ancient Silk Road. A sixth of China's territory, it's now home to 25 million people of different ethnicities. In this series, CGTN explores the length and breadth of this geographically and ethnically diverse region. For 4 weeks, we'll bring our 5,000-mile journey to you live. Join us as we travel through history, document modern-day Xinjiang, and reveal its natural beauty and discover what makes the region so distinctive. Amazing Xinjiang on CGTN.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Now, Sudan's Security and Defense Council has declared a national state of emergency for 3 months due to flooding. Floods in the country have killed over 90 people this year and have inflicted damage on more than 500,000 people, causing total and partial collapse of more than 100,000 homes. The Sudanese Minister of Labor and Social Development, Lina El Sheikh, says the rates of floods and rain for this year has exceeded the records set during the years 1946 and 1988, with expectations of continued rising indicators. Meanwhile, in South Sudan, the country's security situation keeps improving. Due to this, the UN is withdrawing troops from some sites used for protecting civilians. Astatal has more.
The UN mission in South Sudan has started withdrawing troops from its protection of civilian sites. The POC sites were set up to give citizens a safe place to flee to when civil war broke out in 2013.
POC sites were set up to protect people in imminent physical danger. They did so for many ethnicities and for many years, but today many people are staying there so they can access services.
Things are now relatively safe. Those living in the POC sites now feel safe enough to go to work, school, or the market.
That has occurred because we assess that any threats that may have existed in the past are no longer in existence today. Importantly, withdrawing from these sites means that those troops who were occupied at the POCs can be redeployed to hotspots where people's lives are in immediate danger, like in Jonglei.
Those living in POC sites where troops are being withdrawn will not be forced to leave.
Nobody will be pushed out or asked to leave when UNMISS withdraws, and humanitarian services will continue. I want to make and emphasise those points. It's just that the sites will no longer be under our jurisdiction, but will be, as I said, IDP sites like so many other IDP sites across the country. And it'll be the government's responsibility to find other land for these people to settle or to help them return to their homes or assist them or assist those whose houses are occupied by others.
South Sudan's National Police Service will be responsible for maintaining law and order in the future. Criminal activity in POC sites is already being reported to local police in War, Bor, and Juba. Astatal, CGTN.
In Malawi, unwanted pregnancies and marriages are on the rise amid the coronavirus pandemic. Research shows that reproductive health services have taken a backseat as national health services shift their focus to caring for people with COVID-19. The lack of access to sexual and reproductive health services has exposed girls to the risk of having unprotected sex, which could lead to pregnancies.
In the southern district of Falombe in Malawi, 17-year-old ELIZA Majuri is counting weeks before she delivers her first baby. She was lured into a relationship with a married man in March. Poverty, she says, drove her to this situation.
At the time he proposed, he committed to marry me if I got pregnant and that we would be living together. At the time, I did not know he was married already. I only got to know about it while I was already pregnant. That is why he spends much time with his wife at home. So I just accepted the situation because there was nothing else I could do.
Eliza was very respectful to everyone, both young and the old. She also used to do well in school. When she got pregnant, I got so angry, remembering how I struggled to raise her. I resolved to chase her to her husband's because I did not expect this from her.
ELIZA is one of thousands of teenagers who have fallen pregnant across Malawi between March and June 2020. Authorities directly link the problem to the coronavirus pandemic.
The numbers have gone up because at the same time last year, the teenage pregnancy rate was at, the percentage was at 29%. That is 29 out of every 100 pregnancies were in young ones between the ages of 10 and 19. And if you look at the same period this year, 2020, that has increased to 35%, which means that out of every 100 pregnancies, 35 are between the ages of 10 and 19.
We believe that there could be disruptions because the people that are supposed to be providing these sexual reproductive health services for young people are now occupied to now be able to manage COVID-19 cases if at all they present themselves at the health centers. So we're actually thinking that there's a disruption of these services.
The problem has led to many of the pregnant teens being pushed into early marriages, and Malawi is not alone. Our United Populations Fund research released in April predicted that globally there could be 7 million unintended pregnancies during the COVID-19 pandemic. Chamwono, CGTN.
Now on to our continuing CGTN Digital Safari series. We take a look at the wildebeest migration in Kenya's Masai Mara. We then head over to South Africa for some more wildlife viewing.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari. In the Masai Mara, the grassy plains echoed with the sound of the wildebeest, zebra and topi making their way towards the banks. The abundance of crossing points caused confusion. But after some contemplation, the brave leapt into the river. Despite the danger that was quite visibly lurking atop the surface. Further down the river, a calmer entry to the water was seen, as 2 hippos made their way back in after a night of grazing. In the Owino Pride's territory, the lionesses were desperate for a morning meal. Unfortunately, their choice of prey was way too alert for their triangular strategy. Meanwhile, in South Africa, the atmosphere was calmer. In Pride Lands, a lioness was seen looking for breakfast. And in Pinda, the young male lions played around with a rock at the waterhole in what looked to be a routine practice of perfecting their hunting skills. All the while patiently waiting for a meal to be brought their way. In the Lowveld, we were excited by the sight of Tingana, the Duke of Djuma. This male leopard has reigned over the area for a few years now, but true to his name, he hid in the long grasses, giving us only a few moments to really see his impeccably aging stature. In Gala, a female leopard stood tall in a tree as she devoured her impala breakfast. Join us every day at 4:30 GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
And it's just about time for the sports. Here's what's coming up.